We're here, we're live. I was actually in the process of letting Instagram know that our stuff is live, but we don't actually need to stop the conversation for that. So, what's going on, y'all? This is the Design Critics, and you don't have to be a kid to. Or hopefully, if you are a kid, you understand that we will be talking like adults here. So, to set the mood right here, we are the motherfucking Design Critics. This is episode 3, and I am joined here by my co-host, whom I will let introduce himself here.
Yeah, I'm Scott, and I'm a UX designer by trade. And as discussed before, I've got a number of other hobbies. But yeah, Ray and I like to talk about all the good stuff we've got going on. And we've got a special guest today.
Yes, we do.
I'm
Who are we joined
special.
by today?
All right, all right.
Let my man introduce himself. Well, you know what? Like, I guess we'll do it the old-fashioned way here, since we're learning here. I'm joined by my good friend here, Reggie LeFlore, is a mural artist that I grew up here with, pretty much going all the way back to my childhood. I'm gonna let him tell you a little bit more about himself, though.
What's
What's
happening,
good,
y'all?
Reggie?
What's good? What's good? Reggie LeFlore. I'm a visual artist that's originally from Omaha, Nebraska, currently living in the Twin Cities. That's Minneapolis and St. Paul. A visual artist that works in the style of street art, influenced by graffiti culture, illustration. Do a lot of stuff in between, but my main stuff is kind of just focusing on portraits and the stories that kind of come out of that, and using tools such as murals and canvas projects and live demos to really just try to tell as many stories as I can. Um, and then a lot of things change, from year to year and stuff. I mean, you get better, and then you get more acclimated to kind of what you want to do, with your art. If you're like me, you get jaded pretty quick and easy, and so that kind of affects things. Um, but ultimately, I'm just a black creative, just trying to do the best thing that he can do before I can. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can speak for myself in saying that I'm super excited to have these conversations with you because, as I was mentioning a couple minutes ago, I was checking out your stuff, and it's super cool. And I have been watching a couple other artists on YouTube and stuff who sort of share their process and how they do what they do and what motivates them and all this stuff. And I'm really excited to sort of hear,
I
uh,
don't.
your take on all that stuff too.
I appreciate that. And like I mentioned earlier, I can talk a bunch about all that stuff. So y'all need to have me hush up or shut up or anything. Just say the word. Otherwise, I can just keep on going. So
Nah, man, you're
yeah,
the star, bro. We got all night.
oh man. Shoot. I don't want
So,
to talk too much about myself. I mean, like first and foremost, I guess, street art culture, graffiti culture, those are the current things that I'm really, trying to tap into, and, trying to understand the sort of like power and like influence that has in a lot of communities. And, you know, I don't know. It's just like over the past like several years, my work has gravitated towards a sort of a process that tries to reflect communities and like the conversations that are in communities. But I've been an illustrator my entire life. I grew up, wanting to make cartoons and comic books and make video games, mangas, animes, all that stuff. Um, Very tough to jump on in Omaha, Nebraska. And Ray, I'm sure that you can attest to that,
mm-hmm.
just a little bit. Um, but I mean, I moved to the Twin Cities with a friend of mine in 2015. Friend of mine, a woman that I was dating, my ex, and we were just trying to do our arts thing. She went to school, to get her master's in fine arts at a pretty decent, school here in the Twin Cities, and I sort of played a supportive role. And I guess after moving here, I quickly realized just how more of a progressive and like supportive art scene it is here in the Twin Cities, and also very challenging because there's a lot of like, a lot of talent. Um, there's a lot of folks that are really tapped into the communities, and people use their resources, responsibly and stuff, and that sort of inspired me to kind of change up my work style, as someone that I've been trying to be more conscious, with like my work and how it affects, the environments that I do my things in.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, it's just the more that I've been here, it'll be 5 years this upcoming Halloween.
nice.
Um, I decided to move Halloween because I figured, people would be trick or treating, so traffic and stuff wouldn't be as crazy, but
Hey,
it was the same.
what was the big
But
difference between the art scene in Omaha in comparison to where you are now?
Um, well, I would say the support, for one. I feel like that there are a lot more folks, and maybe just because, the Twin Cities combined, it's just a much larger group, than Omaha. But some of the experiences that I had in Omaha, I had my share of support, but there were some aspects of it that felt a bit superficial, and there's some clickiness, with like certain communities and things, and I just didn't really feel like I was growing, intellectually, I guess, as an artist,
In Omaha?
and yeah, in Omaha for
Okay.
sure. Uh, and there's a lot that can kind of go into that. I don't want to talk too bad about the hometown that I'm from, because that's where I found my identity as an artist.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, I got a question about that then. So,
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a two-part question, but I'm curious about what got you into art to begin with, and what made you decide to actually start taking art seriously as like a potential thing that you could sustain off of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me time myself because I can keep going.
we got all day, man. Let's go.
Um, well,
I
yeah.
want good
So,
answers.
well, let's see. Shit. So I grew up wanting to make cartoons. Like I said, I grew up playing a ton of Sonic the Hedgehog and Street Fighter. Those are the
Hey,
things that I sketched a ton of in elementary school. Ask anybody that I went to elementary school with, and everybody was tired of my shit. Everybody was like, "Man, all this dude wants to do is draw Sonic and Knuckles and Tails and Vega and Sagat and blah blah blah. This and that." And so
uh-huh.
fifth grade, I remember coming up with my own characters, and they sort of kind of dovetailed off of the same sort of worlds, with like Street Fighter and Sonic, and then I got more acclimated to like comic books and stuff, and like the stuff that I got into, it wasn't like the typical like X-Men, Captain America and so on and so forth. I got into Battle Chasers, Danger Girl, um, and all these different artists, Joey Mad, J. Scott Campbell, Roberto Ramos, and Adam Hughes, and all these other folks.
Damn, bro, you name
Uh,
dropping a bunch of people that I can't even think of any of the work that they've done. That's
I can,
impressive. That's cool though.
uh,
No, I love that because like this is obviously Scott and I are in a totally different world than you are. So like
well, I'm sure they all kind of mesh and merge in some sort of way, but in this case, yeah, that's where my influences came from, and naturally, I wanted to, jump into that realm and make my own comic books and cartoons and all this other stuff, and so I didn't have access to computers and things growing up, so I just wrote a bunch of my own stories and tried to come up with my own little comic panels here and there without really any training, any real understanding of the sort of environment surrounding like comic book culture, and with video games and stuff, but I still consumed a lot of that. And then junior high and high school hit. You get more in tune, with your identity and what you are trying to do with your life. And I feel like in junior high and high school, there are a lot of folks that try to push you into like certain things, but it can be a little problematic when people don't know, like really anything about you. Like I remember getting some advice from a high school counselor that thought that I should get into cinematography.
Hmm.
um,
Why'd she think that?
because I talked about wanting to animate. I talked about wanting to create like feature length like animated films and all this other
Hmm.
stuff, and I felt like maybe she just had a little bit of selective hearing or
Mm-hmm.
something. But yeah, I'm really happy that I didn't follow that advice. But the advice that I did follow was from a couple other teachers, a couple other instructors and stuff. So I had an American government teacher, Sean Barons, Mr. B is what we call him. And all of my other teachers, they would see me, sketching and stuff in the back of the classroom, and they'll, grab my paper and they'll rip it up. They'll call it a waste of time and like, like assholes. Um, and then so Mr. B, looks at my work and he's just like, you come after, come see me after class. I'm like, shit, all right, I'm getting into trouble. And so I bring, my backpack and stuff with me and stuff. And then he pulls out these comic books that he worked on writing with a couple other artists. Uh, yeah, turns out that not writes, but like he wrote comic books for a living. Before he did all of the teaching and stuff. And so that's when he got me on top of like, learning about all these other artists. And I went to my first message board, digital webbing. It was like the first message board that I went to for like comic books and mangas and all of that stuff. And then it sort of snowballed from there. Like I really wanted to learn how to make comic books, but I was also like really stubborn. Like I had my own sort of like process that I tried to learn in Photoshop, and ultimately I just kind of used it, for my own sort of benefit. Not really actually like learning like how to properly use Photoshop. Um, but it sort of helped with I guess my sort of like comic book illustration style. Um, and then after high school, there was an art school that I was looking at that you guys might be familiar with, the Art Institutes.
Ah, ha ha
Uh,
ha. Yes, indeed.
yeah, so
Aren't I?
talked to admissions reps and all these other folks, and they got me to look at this accelerated bachelor's degree in media arts and animation, and they sold it up like they were just like, yeah, it's an accredited college. You'll be able to work, positions, with like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and this and that, and around that time it was tough to really get any or gain any sort of sense of direction. Um, So hold on, I just got an alert.
Yeah, I got the same thing. Thanks, Zoom.
Um, yeah, so to wrap this up, yeah, I basically just process following the wrong advice I felt.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed pretty cool, wanting to animate and all this other stuff. But money is another factor. And being a poor black kid from Omaha, Nebraska, with not a whole lot of resources, it just didn't really work out. So I ended up trying to pursue that route and incurred a lot of debt, from it. I'm just taking some, community college courses and became depressed and just whatever. I mean, I don't feel like that's the interesting part. Like, talking about Omaha and stuff. Like, I the courses that I took through the art institutes, they were all like online courses.
Mm-hmm.
There was an opportunity for me to go out to Chicago, which was like the closest school for this accelerated bachelor's degree. But I had made some plans with a family member at the time, and we had a little bit of a fallout and misunderstanding with some things. And I was just like, screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and apply for my own student loans and take these courses online, and hopefully, like everything else will go in the right path. And And again, I ended up accruing debt from it, and turned out to be one of the decisions that I sort of regretted doing.
Why'd you regret it?
Well, because of money, and really just the mental space. I wasn't really in the right mental space to really take on these courses. Um, and Yeah, I just felt like I was taking wrong advice. These admissions reps are sneaky. Like I had a much cheaper route, that I could take, just to get all my basic stuff out of the way, in terms of, you know, um, general education classes and stuff like English composition and so on and so forth. But yeah, I was convinced that, okay, well, taking everything through this Art Institute's, branch is where I need to go.
Who had you convinced? Was it like the reps, or was
Yeah,
it
there's a
like?
couple admissions reps.
Of course.
Yeah, and I had some options to take some courses at the Metro Fort Omaha campus, um, but I was told that those credits wouldn't, most of the credits wouldn't, switch over. But if there was advice that I would give myself now as a 34-year-old to someone in my early 20s, um, like taking those community college courses, is that's where I needed to be. Especially in terms of like money and stuff, and all that other stuff can follow suit a little later, I feel. But
You said that was where you needed to be.
yeah, I felt like it. Yeah, because it was the most accessible, as opposed to um, the Art Institute school, and the branches, being something that was just maybe like a sort of long term, thing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So,
That
but
makes sense.
yeah. But anyway, I mean, that's all in the past. I mean, none of that really affected much, apart from just it halted kind of this path to where I'm at now as an artist. And I guess where I'm at now is using my skill set to create work that sort of fits in, my surroundings, my communities, and so on and so forth. But before I get there, I guess I went a good year and a half of just not doing any work, and then I ran into my buddy Gerard, who I went to high school with, and that's where things, like my path sort of, changed up, because so he was an artist as well. We took, most of the same art courses and stuff online. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, not online. At Benson at my high school.
Hmm.
And then after high school, we kind of just parted ways. Everybody kind of has their own, things that they're doing. And I went the school route and kind of failed at that. And then I ran into him at a party. And at that party, he had a big mural project that he did inside of this establishment that we were in. And I didn't know that it was his at the time. So I'm talking
That's
with
cool.
him, just chopping it up and stuff. And I'm just like, man, look at this dope ass piece. Who did this? And he's like, oh, thanks, man. I did it.
Flex. That's sick.
I mean, straight up flag. I mean, like, probably not intentionally, but like, he was like, yeah, thanks, man. I did it. I was just like, what? You're on this level? Not like comparing or anything, but, like we were high school, artists, doing our high school thing. And I, it blindsided me. I was just like, holy shit, he's on this, like this level. And then, so we started talking for a couple more days, and just catching up. And he was showing me some of the mural projects in the city, and started inviting me to these art parties and these functions that he was being featured in, and all this other stuff. And that exposed a different side of Omaha that I didn't know existed. Like, there's a graffiti community in Omaha. There's a street art scene. There's like all these bougie art parties with wine and cheese.
Yes, there are. And sometimes they're in like the dingiest like areas, and that makes it so cool. I went to one art party that was like one day I went to this space, and it was for one artist, and this one artist had just an exhibition of his own work, and there were like hors d'oeuvres there, and there was like water and small things to drink, but it was just pieces of his work. He had some things you can buy. And then I went to this same studio like a whole other time at like 11 o'clock at night, and there was a hip hop show full of like a whole bunch of local artists that I had never heard of, and they had the place like packed out, doing a freaking hip hop show all night, and it was probably one of the most unique concerts I've ever been to.
Man, it's dope. The atmosphere, around all that stuff is, I think that's and man, I'm missing it now, during this pandemic, that we're in. But when I was going to these things, just yeah, the energy, with like live shows and all these, like all these people that are showing up and having all these like varying like conversations and things, and some of them were a little weird, but like for the most part, things were pretty dope. But yeah, just like you said it, hip hop acts, some like punk bands, playing and stuff, and that was the atmosphere. And then there was Benson First Fridays. That was a thing that just started up right as I was coming out and meeting all these different artists, and there's First Fridays, First Thursdays, all over the country. And so with that, that was like, oh, that's an excuse to drink, that's an excuse to like socialize and like, and talk and so on and so forth. And I just really love that energy that was around there. And then seeing Gerard be part of that, energy was really, captivating too. And so yeah, I'm just like, man, I want to get on this level. How do I fuck with all of this? And then that's when he showed me how to mess with spray paint. That shit's intimidating. As
that was a question that I've been been holding on to. It's where did spray paint as a medium come in? I was curious. So
that came,
my answer.
That came 2010, when he and I, first linked back up. I go over to a studio space and I'm seeing all these, cans and everything, and he's like, we pull up a computer, jump on the internet, we pull up a bunch of these like different artists and stuff. That's when I first heard of Shepard Fairey and Banksy, and like the typical artists. And then I was really just like, man, there's all these other like dope ass like graph heads or like like actual graffiti artists who live and breathe graffiti culture, that were part of the movements that blew up in Philly and New York and elsewhere. And then he just had a crate of like clogged up cans and messed up caps and shit, I can't remember all the other stuff. He had so many different cans of spray paint, and I was just like, how the fuck do I use all of this? Like, oh yeah, I got this little wooden surface area or whatever, like just mess around with it on that, have fun. And I was just like, I'm a digital artist, I don't know how to mess with any of this shit. Like, what's this all about? And then that's when I started researching Shepard Fairey, and then like other similar artists, B-Toy and C215, and then I started getting into the documentaries and started figuring all the stuff out. And then I realized just the culture, behind it. Like I said earlier, it's just, they're actual like graph heads that like live, breathe, and die, in this culture. And that was a thing that I really enjoyed. And then I saw a lot of Black folks, that were part of these, these movements. Just became inspired. Seeing Shepard Fairey, make stencils out of his digital work was really interesting, because I just picked up, making vectors and vexels out of faces and stuff. And really the concept sort of just blossom into the work that I do now. You're taking references and then, taking tonal values out of those references and then, putting them onto something tangible. And I did that through stenciling, using a spray can on a very small surface is very difficult. if you don't have the right tools to help with the stuff that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so with stenciling, it was perfect for me because, you know, I had that graphic design background. All the other artists in Omaha that I grew up around didn't know anything about computers, Gerard included, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
there was like some intricate, you know, stuff that I felt like I could do. And so yeah, so I just mirrored all my graphic design stuff.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I think we're losing Reggie.
We lost you, Reggie. Uh-oh. I wonder if
Anybody.
Oh,
Oh, he's back.
you're back. We lost you for a second, Reggie.
Oh man. Okay.
Only for
Oh,
about 10 seconds.
there.
Ooh. I wonder if it's my connection. Damn.
It was only for a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, you good now.
Okay. If it acts up again, I can go into the dining room or something. But yeah, so I started messing around with stencils. Didn't like how the stencils or how the pieces looked after I used the stencils. Um, and I was just like, oh, well, I still got my, like, you know, freehand sketch, you know, techniques and stuff. So let me go ahead and try that. And then it clicked. You know, I was just like, all right, well, you know, I can take like something that's almost like a mixed media piece. You know, you're taking graphic design stuff and you're taking references and you're putting them on canvases or, you know, mid-scale, large scale stuff. And then once the basic bare minimum stuff is up there, then you can do all the touch-ups and freehand sketches and embellishments and all this other stuff. And that was a thing that I became just really into, almost obsessive over. And it stood out, you know, because there were other artists that were using stencils in Omaha at the time. But none of these stencil artists, in my personal opinion, really knew how to draw. You know, like they didn't really have like the fundamentals of like, you know, if something looks a little off, you know, in terms of like anatomy or like perspective and stuff, like how do you fix that without relying on, you know, certain tools. And yeah, 2012, that was the year that really all blew up for me. And yeah, I've been developing my technique ever since. So
I got a question for you. So you said that you focus specifically, or this technique that you were learning really related and helped you expand towards mid and large style like canvases. You left out small canvases, which I'm curious about because you have a pretty extensive history in regards to small canvases.
yeah.
Why the occlusion?
The the small scale stencils like that, I guess that's gonna get me talking about the consumerist aspect of the stuff that I despise. I hate having to I dislike having to really cater to consumerist culture. You know, and I felt like with canvases, you know, that was a thing that was like easily accessible to people. What I enjoyed about it was that, hey, I could take all this digital stuff and I can put it on to some people who can grab, move around and position and so on and so forth. But then that also forced me to really, you know, monetize my work or like or really try to like market, you know, my work towards a certain type of person. And it just became boring, you know, really quick. It became something that people only cared about if they had, you know, money or resources to acquire it. Versus, you know, like, hey, this is a piece that I want to talk about that talks about, you know, sexuality and like, you know, like you know, or identity or like, you know, color palettes and whatnot. I didn't think that it didn't seem like people really cared, you know, about it. And I feel like part of that, you know, is like I brought it on, myself because that's how I marketed myself with the first like couple years. Like, hey, I'm this new artist that's in town. Like, hey, I can appropriate all these images of all these actors and actresses and so forth. And then 2012 was a segue into another thing or whatever. That was the year that Trayvon Martin was murdered, February, I believe, of 2012. And the work that I was creating, like the people that were purchasing my work were of the variety that are now Trump supporters and like, all lives matter, sympathizers and all stuff. Not to get all like, crazy into that.
No, man, go for it.
And look, it was incredibly apparent that people didn't give a fuck about people that looked like me, people that had the same skin tone as me. But hey, I can, create these like Walking Dead characters, all day and stuff. And like, people will buy all that shit up. And then they'll flip around and they'll say the same thing that I just can't stand, when it comes to, seeing innocent lives, being murdered. Yeah, almost within the same sort of like couple Facebook posts, like they'll post like, a work that they purchased from me. And then they'll talk about like, oh, well, Trayvon should have complied, the guy had a gun and like this and that. And then so that like segued into really just, like fuck consumerist culture.
Yeah, man, you touched on a lot of things actually that I was wanting to ask you about. I've been curious, you and I talk a whole lot about consumerism, right? And like capitalism and the degree to which those things are necessary to have a value-based culture. But like, at what point does it become detrimental? And you and I talk about like the upsides of it. Like I'll talk about the upsides, the extreme upsides maybe. You'll talk about the extreme downsides. But there's this gray area that really defines all of it, right? Like, you talked specifically just now about consumerism and how that drives the interest in your work as opposed to interest in your work itself. Like, it's like, okay, I can afford it. I now have $200. Now I want to get a portrait of, my kid and their dog. Even though, like, the whole basis of that work comes from street culture. And then to kind of flip it and kind of pervert it to be like this whole thing where it's like, oh, now there's this Walking Dead character where you have, and now you're opening yourself up to litigation because you're taking this character that's already, somebody else's property, and now you're flipping it for $1 for this person, when they may not even believe in your cause to begin with. And it's like, what, like, I guess that leads me to my next question that you've kind of started answering already, but it's like, how do you find meaning in your work? Like, what is it about your work that makes it like you're very much the kind of artist that you're at a point, and you just explained this, right? You're at this point now where you do work that means something. Like, you're not just going to, let somebody, you're going to have some reservations about, letting somebody spend like a few $100s on some piece that doesn't mean anything other than just like, other than like a trophy. But like, what is it about your work? Like, or what is it like, what meaning are you looking for in regards to your work? Because you make a living off of it, right? You're in a very fortunate position that you fought tooth and nail for. Like, let's not get it twisted. You worked your ass off, and you started just like everybody else starts. It was art on the side first, and you stayed true to the way you approach art, and that created a lane for you to actually be able to continue to spread your message and be rewarded for it. How do you How do you balance that?
Shit, that's a good question. Well, first and foremost, I want to mention that, yeah, when I first started, all this stuff, I do want to acknowledge that, like, yeah, there's some capitalization, or capitalizing rather, onto, street art and graffiti culture, that I sort of took on. I have the skill set, I have the technique, um, and I'd say for the first year or so, I was calling myself a graffiti artist. Not understanding, the rich and genuine culture, that comes out of that, and how it changes once money is involved, in it. Um, and Yeah, I just I realized after a while that I really needed to kind of change up what I'm doing and try to put forth a sense of identity, within my work. What is it that I am trying to achieve, with it? And asking myself, the hard questions, and some of those questions being, are you doing this for money? Are you doing this for fame? Are you doing this for notoriety of sorts? And there were quite a few instances that sort of pushed me away, from all of that stuff. Very thankful that I'm able to make a living off of this stuff now. But it's a certain, I guess, it's a certain level of understanding that you have to have, with like yourself, that I don't feel like a lot of folks have the privilege, or yeah, I'll say privilege, to really understand. That kind of sounded a little rambly, but I guess to my point, um, I had to make those hard decisions. I had to understand, like, okay, so my end goal, with my work is to tell stories. How do I do that? Okay, well, you have these folks that you're working with, with your photos, your models, photographers, that sort of thing. Can you really tell that story by creating a reference to a Breaking Bad character, or an Avengers character,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that shit just seemed meaningless to me. All these like consumerist pieces, I guess is what I would call it. Um, but I kept seeing more of that. People wanted more of these type of pieces of work, and it was more of people like just really just like zoned into hey, he's his technique is like really really cool, it's dope. Um, but then other folks are like, all right, well, what is it that he's saying with his work? And I had to get challenged with that question several times for me to really just have that understanding. And thankfully, I was with a woman for 3.5 years that reinforced that challenge, because with her work as an artist, she really had those tough conversations that was being generated around identity and like her place in the environments and stuff, and whatnot. And yeah, so I had that understanding, but then also I had the understanding of like money. That's the thing that comes and goes. Money's going to be around forever. uh and there's a time and place for like hey, I need to do this to pay the bills. I need to do this so I can get that exposure and whatnot. I feel like the important thing is to be completely honest with it, and try not to shame other folks for needing to make a quick buck, or needing to to work on something, to get their sort of like, their place out there or whatever. Um, but for me, I was just like, it affected me a ton, seeing that there are a lot of stories that weren't being told about, just being a Black American, being shit, it's just a lot of things. And so I sort of gravitated towards projects and opportunities that allowed me to share that story, not to like talk, in place of like other people, but I started being really selective with who I started doing collaborative projects with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I cut back on some of the suggestive themes, with my work, because I was understanding that like the audience that was looking at my work, they were much younger. um, and
Interesting.
yeah, so like I think naturally after like having that understanding and like doing all of what you can to accommodate to that, um, I think there's like this natural organic thing that kind of comes out of that. Um, if I answered your question, I'm still rambling, but yeah. So
And that's all super interesting. This like delicate, and I think it's the same with any art, whether it's music or visual arts or anything else, where there's this delicate balance, and it's like it all starts with learning the craft, right?
mhm.
And like the technique and the craft and how to do the thing, and then you begin to find this voice of like, well, now I know how to do this thing. I've learned this new way of communicating with the world, and how can I use it to say what's in my head? How do I use it to communicate with the world, my thoughts, my feelings?
Mhm.
Um, but then it's like then there's like, okay, this is my life, but how do I make a living doing this too?
Yeah.
But without compromising that vision. And I feel like that's a struggle for all types of artists, and I always find it interesting to hear artists talk about how they find that balance.
Well, shit. It's the type of society that we live in. Capitalist, consumerist culture. And that's in so many different things. And you know, if I didn't have to worry about rent and
Hmm.
maintaining, a vehicle and whatnot, I feel like I would be making my best work. Absolutely.
Right.
But there's just a thing to where you gotta make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a really good example of this uh, is with Shepard Fairey, who an artist that I've never met. But he was an artist that I had such a love-hate relationship with, because because of a lot of things, but for the sake of this example, um, he was one of the first artists that I saw adapt his digital stuff into tangible stuff. That allowed me to see someone work with spray paint, work with paint markers, paint brushes in certain aspects, big canvases, small canvases, wood panels, so on and so forth. I thought that shit was dope. The other side of things, it's just like, all right, well, he's this white artist that, has this really, really huge platform. And it feels like some of the messaging behind his work is a bit superficial, or that it's like, kind of played out, not anything that makes me feel good as a black artist. Um, and seeing non-black artists create work that highlights black pain or black trauma or just black anything, like I deemed it to be a problem, for me.
Hmm.
um but then also understanding that like these type of artists, they do the things that they do, with their own agendas and stuff, but and maybe I didn't quite articulate that in this instance, but like some of the work that Shepard Fairey does, he has his own clothing brand, merch, all of that stuff,
Right,
that's
right, right.
around, his Obey brand and what have you. um but what I did understand out of it is that like hey, people have like families and like their own obligations and all this other stuff, so it's just like we have to operate in this sort of like realm of like capitalism and consumerism, because when we don't, that's where problems happen. I feel, um like I can't do the stuff that I do broke. I can't be, a struggling homeless artist, creating the stuff on the scale that I am. And thankfully, I'm in environments to where, people understand like the 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 money aspect of things. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't have to always be bent, to that. Like I feel like I'm in much more control of what I push out there in the universe. Um, I feel like that there's a lot more responsibility, that I have as a black artist, um, to, to my environments and, and other communities and things. And yeah, so, you know,
Man, that reminds me of the whole like idea of like uh artists that have music that's released in waves after they pass away,
mm,
and like the morality in that. Um,
yeah,
and there was an example of Pop Smoke. This guy, this hip hop artist Pop Smoke, who recently
yeah,
passed away,
yeah.
and 50 Cent became a major player in actually getting that album finished. And he was like on his way up to the top before he unfortunately passed. But it became an issue of making sure his family is taken care of. And so it's like, okay, well, there's this artist, and he's clearly profitable. There are clearly people that would want to have their work attached to his work, even though he's passed away, because it increases the value of their work. But ethically speaking, where do you draw the line when, at the end of the day, this money is going right back to this man's family?
Mm,
And it's like this idea of like this level of consumerism that is unfortunately maybe I won't say necessary, but um, choosing to totally forego it creates more problems that you have to solve for. Um, yeah, it's just an interesting line. Like where's like when and yeah, go for it.
well, what I want to say with that, that immediately gets me to think about Prince, um, for instance. Shortly after I moved here, the next year, Prince died. And I remember First Ave, they threw this big ass block party. It was a free event. Everybody can show up Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Everybody's dancing. It's crazy to think that people were so close to each other, with just how crazy things are now. Um,
Miss that. Miss it.
Uh-huh.
yeah. But the worst to worry about is what, catching a cold. But yeah. Uh, But yeah, I remember that weekend, there were so many people out there just like selling print shirts and merchandise and all this other stuff. And like, it had me think about like just how quick people are to capitalize, on, pain and tragedy and whatnot. Um, which is like, it's understandable. People have like, emotional ties to a lot of things, but I feel like a lot of times people don't.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
especially the artists that I see that, man, people are super quick to put up, inspirational portraits of Robin Williams and like, Chadwick and like so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it becomes a problem for me, but also, like another part of me is trying to like compartmentalize that, and just be like, all right, well, that's how people make their quick buck. That's how they make their money or whatever. But I also, look at that and see that like, all right, well, I got standards. I'm not that type of person that's going to do that. That's my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
To where like I don't want to create work, that profits off people's pain or tragedy. Um, and with all the black murders and shootings and everything that's been happening this year, like we still keep seeing that. Um, and yeah, so as far as a line, that needs to be drawn, I guess it's very individualistic. Um,
Is
but
there is there a point at which an artist gets a certain level of success, and now success can be measured in any number of ways, right? But is there a point at which an artist achieves a certain level of success where they can use those sort of so I'm thinking in particular, I know that there's an artist named Dale Stefanos. He's in the Boston area, and he does illustrations, caricatures. He's done stuff for Rolling Stone and New Yorker and all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
And he will. I follow him on Instagram, and he'll frequently, when if someone dies, he'll, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg or whatever, right? He does a, like, that's it really seems like, and whether this is true or not, I don't know, but it really seems like he uses that, like, his expression of his artwork to mourn the loss of that public figure, and he puts it up on Instagram. And to me, at least, a casual observer at best, right, it seems like he's really using that to, like, because he's so prolific, maybe, that he's using that to mourn the loss of this public figure, and in the way that it makes some kind of meaning for him. So I guess my question kind of then is, like, is that because of a certain level of notoriety, or an artist reaches a certain level of I don't know the right word, prolificness of their work, that lets them do that without it being sort of self-promotional, like they're just like a way to share your grief through art without it being self-promotional, like, or can you even separate that because of the sort of consumer society we live in? I don't know.
Well, shit. I mean, that's a really good question. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can't really stop people, from doing the things that they do. And we really can't, like, prove, that a person is, like, netting, millions, off of this, like, profiting, off of, like, someone's death or whatever. I get the aspect of, like, people just, like, making pieces because they want to create a tribute to it. But I feel like more often than not, and that's not always the case, but more often than not, a lot of these artists that, like, create these types of works after a tragedy occurs, they're doing it because of the notoriety, or because there's some sort of gain to it, I feel. And I know with my work specifically, I wanted to distance myself away from that type of crowd. Like, I didn't want to pigeonhole as, okay, well, go to Reggie, he'll paint you a picture of Robin Williams, or he'll paint you a picture of RBG and so on and so forth. But I've done that in the past. I had a situation to where someone reached out to me right after Prince died, like the day after, and he was just like, "You were the guy that I want this, like, this piece. I want this piece, to be done by you." And I'm just like, I don't want to do it. Like, I don't mind doing it because, like, you've supported me in the past before. But like, I'll feel a certain way about trying to making some money off of it. Like, man, like, you knock these things out of the park. Like, I really want you to put this project together, and I will pay you. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I'll go ahead and put this together. And I had posted it on my Instagram back in 2016 when I first did it, and then I went ahead and deleted it because followers and stuff that I got. Some months and some years later, they'll scroll all up and down my IG page, and they'll see that piece, and they're just like, "Oh, I want one of those." And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that."
Yeah,
interesting.
Oh, it's interesting. That's interesting too.
Yeah.
Sort of like, can you recreate this thing for me? Whereas it seems like it's like a one-time thing between you and the person that commissioned that work, right?
Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yo.
So, how do you um, separate that from like? So there, I agree with the idea that like you and other mural artists are among a very specific and highly qualified group of people that can create work that's memorable on the scale that people are looking for. Should be paid for that work. To some, well, even if it's not monetary, like that work is valuable. So I get, so it's not that you should be paid for it, right? It's that that work is highly valuable, um, and people acknowledge that, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I'm of the idea that you like it. You don't have to get paid for that kind of work. I think whether or not you get paid for that work should be more up to the artist. Um, but that work, like I think that work is still valuable. But my question mainly is around black plight and creating maybe not even black plight, but just social plight. Maybe like a community death or like, a place getting broken into and looted. Like a community place, not riots. I'm talking like, some place gets, destroyed, like some part of the community gets pillaged and somebody wants to honor it. Um, but it's like, you know, tied to a minority group. Um, those types of projects are highly sought after by people that are not part of those minority groups. Um, but what?
Sorry, it's reminding me of everything that's happened since George Floyd's murder here in Minneapolis.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So like, I'm curious about like how how morality is measured when you're considering um like because there are like I don't think there are lines being drawn, but I think there are discussions that aren't being had to some degree that's causing maybe some person from like California to end up on like some important block on in Minneapolis during this 1 month where these tragedies strike, and it gives them this ability to like you know make their mark, even though that's not how it's accepted by the average community goer. It's just like some piece that's absorbed, and it's like, oh wow, here's George Floyd, rest in peace, he'll be here for a while, we'll remember him. um, but let alone like never mind that the idea that it could be somebody that's not even from that community, or maybe not even from that minority group. um but maybe they empathize with that group, right? Like I don't know, like how do you determine who's eligible for what work, I guess.
I'll say this. So the George Floyd murder and the events that happened almost immediately after is, I feel like, the perfect story to answer that question. So when George was murdered, it was on a Monday. I heard about the info on Tuesday morning as I woke up, and I'm just like, shit, this city's about to blow up. Something crazy is about to happen. And sure enough, there was a big protest that started up. All the info started coming out, and and people were hurt. The city, both of the Twin Cities, both Minneapolis and St. Paul, Twin Cities, just hurting here. Um, all of these images of snapshots of the cop that had his knee on George's neck, um, all of that stuff, the complacent officers that were there, um, all of that stuff, just traumatizing, just crazy. I was just like, I didn't want to do anything, for like that whole week. What I ended up doing a couple days later, I think this was a Wednesday, I show up to the site where he was murdered. And streets are blocked off. There's people on loudspeakers talking, and people were distanced because we're still in the middle of this pandemic, with masks on and all of that stuff. And then I remember there was a section that was being painted on right next to an alleyway mural project that I painted for this other person's business, this other Black business owner, his business that he started up. The woman that was painting this project was this white woman who was or is a local artist, born and raised in Southside Minneapolis, where everything occurred. It was her and two other artists. I believe they were Latinx. Neither of them were Black. They were non-Black artists putting this project together. The woman and I, we talk a bit, and I'm just like, all right, cool, yeah, keep it up, blah blah blah. All the cordial stuff that us artists, say and stuff. I walk off and I hear her, mentioning to a reporter that was there, oh yes, that's Reggie LeFlore. He did this alleyway mural that's over there. You guys should take a look at it. I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. I appreciate that. And then not even a day later, I'm seeing this mural that she put up blasted everywhere. Like, retweeted by Barack Obama, J. Cole, XYZ, like this mural became like the mural, that everybody sees. And then that's where the problems occurred. So, all of this notoriety or all this exposure that this project had got, it blew up, like everybody was talking about this project and everybody was taking pictures, with it and everything else. But the big problem with that was that it was unsanctioned. The artist, and I don't want to say her name because I don't want to, really throw her underneath the bus. And she's a wonderful person, but she fucked up. She didn't have that community feedback, with the folks that were there.
So when you say unsanctioned, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
You mean she didn't have the permission of the community, or didn't have the permission of the building owner?
The community. The building owner allowed it to happen, but when you have projects that talk about that type of stuff, I feel, in my personal opinion, to create, the most responsible work that you can create as an artist, especially with community members living in that community, having to see that piece of work, for weeks, months, years on end.
Sure.
You have to have feedback. Otherwise, it's just another, mural project or public art piece that flexes a privilege.
Especially considering with you guys, you were, as far as location goes, you're right there. Like, that happened in your backyard practically, not literally, but that's those are your stomping grounds. And so
an 8-minute drive away from the place that where George was murdered. 8-minute drive away.
So it's so you see from on a grassroots ground guerrilla level, you see the ramifications of what happens when these communities are infiltrated in these ways. It's almost I'm gonna stop shy of saying gentrification, because we're I don't know all the rules at play. Gentrification is a very heavy word, but there are gentrification type traits that are kind of showing up where it's there are people that are most hurt by maybe not even most hurt, I'll say most affected, that are also they're much closer to the source material of this work, and they're also just as capable of this type of work. But what ends up happening is even if it was a black artist, it wasn't a black artist, but even if it was, you still have this big issue of this thing becoming a big production piece, and it's blasted all over social media, and it becomes a consumer piece. And it's okay, how did this like regardless of what went wrong subjectively or objectively, it's still like this shouldn't have happened this way, right? How did we get here? How can we avoid this to where there isn't like, because there are, you know, this is like the important people at, you know, at the end of the day, George and, you know, people closest to George, the communities that are affected by George and his death, and how the ramifications on them. But that somehow got lost when you start, you know, sharing this piece just because it's a big flashy piece. Yeah, it's like the ramifications are interesting.
Yeah, man. Well, one thing I want to mention, you know, all the stuff that I said earlier about, you know, just, you know, my headspace, you know, like after it happened and I see all these images, you know, with the cops and George, you know, like it really fucked with me, you know, in a way that, man, I hadn't felt low like this in a very, very long time, you know, for a prolonged time frame. You know, usually after a day or a couple days, I'll get over shit. But man, it was tough, you know, being in here the first month, 2 months, you know, here in the Twin Cities. It's still tough, you know. But with that project went up a day after he was murdered.
Whew.
Like a day after.
Wow.
That's pretty wild. I assume that the one like that I've seen all the pictures of, that's pretty wild to know that went up that quick.
I had no idea.
With the black artist. You know, so that's my like my main sort of like understanding, you know, with all of that, you know. And now, you know, she apologized and all of this stuff. And you know, the more that story got out, the more people were just like angry, you know, with the piece. And then, you know, you put these artists underneath a microscope. Now, you know, now you're looking at all of the other previous works and you see like, oh, okay, well, this is their sort of like style, you know, like they create works that highlight, you know, other people's experiences, you know, and the people that are painting these projects are not of those communities. And again, that's that whole microscope thing I talked about with Shepard Fairey. And, you know, it's just it's an unfair thing, you know, that happens, you know, with artists that just have this huge platform. So, you know, here in the Twin Cities, or really just Minnesota, just in general, you know, this artist has this platform, you know. She, along with her organization, I feel, you know, it's a household name, you know, when it comes to, you know, public art and murals and stuff here in Twin Cities, really just everywhere in Minnesota. But that was a fuck up, you know. You know, with the project like that, you know, it's like doing it a day after a murder occurred. Like it only looks like you're profiting off of it. Like it only looks like, you know, you're capitalizing off of this. You know, you could say what you want to say, you know, about it after the fact, but you know, it becomes pretty apparent, you know, like what you're trying to do with your work. And I, you know, as an artist, you know, that's a standard that I'm trying to be sensitive to, and I'm trying to be conscious of the type of work that I push out, because it's very easy to silence a community. It's very easy to say something that truly doesn't reflect, you know, what's happening in your community. But it's also really easy to have dialogue and conversation with people, and that should have happened before everything else. So
I've got a question for you. So, well, this actually comes from the chat. This comes from Megan the Mayor. What's going on, Megan the Mayor? Thank you for joining us.
Megan.
She made a comment. I would like you guys' stance on this. She says, I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask a client to tell you why they want a particular piece and decide if you want to dig into their point of view. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Client in what regard? Are we talking about I'm trying to think, was this something we referenced earlier or just like just now in this in this previous thing I just said?
In general, just like
Yeah.
you can just relate it to really any of these things that that go towards like your thoughts and views in regards to reviewing and accepting a proposal or a project, or even submitting for a project or whatever. Like, I guess what's that?
Said earlier. So presumably it's like more like the Prince thing, right? Like, is it reasonable to ask a client to tell you why they want this particular piece? Like maybe the client's trying to assign some like meaning to their request versus like, oh, I just want, Prince died, I want a commemoration piece.
Or even with George Floyd, and even with even I guess in relation to this, like, because this person made me want to go back to that question, but specifically,
if we're talking about like a client that like creating something for the client and it's just a thing that the client wants, like I'm okay with that. But when it comes to public art, hey, the clients have responsibilities too, just as much as the artist, I feel. So like if I relate this to the George Floyd thing, if a building owner wants a mural of George Floyd, I feel like they're just as responsible as the artists that are putting the project up to. I feel like it would be irresponsible for a client to allow non-Black artists to paint a picture depicting a Black person after a tragedy that they're involved in. But yeah, sure, like it's not illegal or anything. But there's still some responsibility that folks have to take, I feel, when it comes to like public art and stuff. And that kind of snowballs into the whole like, capitalism and consumerism and like, ownership and stuff. When you have a building, that exists in a community that you might do business in or whatever, like you have to be sensitive to stuff like that. You have to be sensitive to all of the things that go into these projects. Otherwise, the communities are going to respond to it.
Was that? Oh,
so, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that does. Was that something that you found that happened? Like, was there like a community response to the that piece?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hennepin County Commissioner. Members of the war, like elected positions, like all of this stuff. People had all kinds of challenges with it.
Wow.
I feel like at large, the artist community in Minneapolis probably reacted. Well, I want to say reacted the most, or had the biggest reaction to it. But a lot of these artists also understood, in my personal opinion, I don't want to speak, for them, but people looked at this artist's work and saw this long history of like work that's being created that doesn't involve the people that it's depicting. Mm-hmm. Some folks would call that a white savior.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing.
I think it's interesting because you have these artists who probably see themselves as allies, right? But they have to, like, there's this line that they have to walk between allyship and privilege, right? And I'm not an artist like that, so I'm not familiar with that challenge necessarily personally, but it seems like a challenging line to walk. But I think in the case, like in this case you're talking about, this particular mural, it's like that person like they just didn't consider that, right? They considered the event, and the art and not the community.
It was an opportunity, 100%. It was an opportunity, and that's like it's kind of the idea. I know I've talked about this with both of you guys, but it's like the idea of an apology and like how flaccid it is, because it doesn't change a whole lot at the end of the day. Like this
So
person.
you still did the thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you came in there like it's easy to apologize on the second day when you spent all day the first day after this person died coming up with this piece. Like you're not even from the city, like like that's like an overnight vote.
In an ideal world, the apology is just the starting point.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
there are things that you need to do to,
Right.
you know, kind of alleviate or in this case, like things that you need to repair,
Right. Exactly.
So yeah, and actually, yeah. So this artist, is from Minneapolis. So from my understanding, born and raised, and she's an older artist, um, who's had this like history, with the Twin Cities and yeah. So I don't know, and it's kind of not kind of it's very unfortunate because this was someone that I've respected, in the past, especially just being kind of like a transient, coming to, the Twin Cities in 2015 and seeing all of this wonderful art, and then meeting all of these wonderful artists, herself included, but also understanding that there are a lot of other Black artists, that are around that might not, have the same playing field or not might they might not be in the same playing field, and so those are things to also consider. And
I've got a question on that note.
mhm.
Do you think, or would you say that there is possibly any I want to be very careful about how I word this, but do you think there were maybe any possible benefits to this mishap? Like, could it have been a possible actual teachable moment that actual caused a change in how the community addresses art?
Yep. I would say that I am benefiting from that, because people are listening to Black voices. People saw the backlash, that happened, with that project, at least locally. Like it's not a thing that's on a national scale. Um, like it's not a nationally like known thing that like, hey, it was a white artist that didn't reach out to the Black community who did this piece. It's more kind of a local thing. And I feel that, yeah, there are a lot of organizations that see that and maybe they don't want to make the same mistakes, and
Yeah.
you know hey, there you go. So one of my recent projects, not saying that this
So,
flexibility that we have is Black kids to put more Black stories out there, and one of the recent pieces that I did, um sorry, this is acting up again. So one of the recent pieces that I did, I took it as an opportunity to talk about Black stories and the spectrum of Blackness and how just fluid it is in so many different ways, and how there's so many starting and endpoints to being Black, not just in America but just in general. um and the folks that were in charge of the building and the business inside the building, they straight up was just like, yeah, I love your work, like, yeah, do whatever you want, like this is really cool. And I don't feel that that opportunity would have came about, or I feel like there would have been more pushback, if shit, even with the Black deaths that've been happening recently, with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so on and so forth, the whole long ass list.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when non-black folks do work and they fuck up, yeah, it feels like more people are paying more attention to more black artists now because of that. Um, which I'm not entirely sorry for, but you know, it's okay. It's all good.
It's not a bad thing. It's really not.
No, I don't think so.
That's really cool to hear about that Overseer project. That's what it's called, right? The Overseer.
Well, yeah, it's a character from that story that's featured into this project, and it
Okay.
sort of organically, you know, kind of went into this whole like, you know, thing. The Afrocentric spectrum is what I call it,
Mm-hmm.
and it dovetails off of a story that I'm trying to tell, you know, with the Overseer story about this demigoddess who is really just trying to get back in touch with her blackness, her African, you know, like just heritage, because a lot of it was just hidden, you know, from her, you know, this whole entire time, and that kind of mirrors the same sort of sad story that a lot of Black Americans have, you know, like we grew up just really not knowing much about our history, you know, unless it was like some like, you know, like aunt or uncle or someone in the family that had that knowledge already. Um, you know, it just hadn't been taught, you know, in schools, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, yeah. So that's again, that's another ongoing thing that I'm still trying to, you know, I'm trying to find the right words to tell these stories. But you know, like I am thankful that you know we have that sort of platform and capacity to be able to tell these stories now. Um, it sucks that you have black folks, you know, get killed, you know, in order for people, you know, to keep listening, you know, to these stories. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Well,
man.
hopefully not like that for long.
What's that?
I said hopefully it doesn't stay that way for long, man.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. Um,
I want to
yeah.
ask you about your Overseer project. Um, so like, it is unfortunate that like, um, there was like this opportunity that was created, you know, from these tragic deaths, unfortunately. But the idea that like, you know, the this could make a, you know, a better future for, you know, artists like yourself and ones that come after you, or even ones that are before you that have been trying maybe and failing, or maybe I'll say not succeeding and finding what they want or whatever. Maybe like the idea that it was it wasn't totally in vain does bring me some peace. Um, and I think it's important that we find a way to, you know, be okay with that. Like it's okay for us to be successful. Like at the end of the day, you know, if our work is valuable, it should be valued.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, you know, like the fucking Lion King. You know, like um, what's his face died. What Mufasa died, and then Simba came in and gave order to that place at some point, but it got dark for a little bit. I'm sorry that was a Lion King reference, but I that right off the backboard,
As long as you don't
don't.
talk about the new Lion King, that shit is trash.
I haven't even seen it yet. But no, I wanted to ask though, like, so the Overseer has become this thing. The Overseer didn't just happen overnight. You've been working on the Overseer for years,
Man.
if not a cool decade plus. At this point,
Oh, really?
um, and it's always been something that's been there, and it's always had this snowball effect. Whereas your skill set has expanded, you've always found a way to go back to it and add to it. And now it's like this big Katamari ball of your best ideas, right?
Yeah.
Now it's at
That's
this.
a good.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, yeah, and so now you're at this point now, man, where it's evolved, right? Like Overseer is now bigger than your sketchbook. You know, it's on
Yeah.
big ass buildings. You've got models that stand in as your characters, and you're creating this story on the fly. Like you've been creating this story on the fly, and you know you got all this history that you're now at the point where you're like, now I need to find a way to verbalize it, right? Because it's always been in the sketchbook.
Yeah.
But this is a story that's been growing for a long time, and now it has a whole goddamn universe behind it.
Yeah.
And so like, what has that journey been like? Like I like it probably doesn't look the same. Like it probably looks totally different from your optics than it does from like maybe my optics or Scott's optics. Because we see the imagery, we see the story, it's fleshed out, it's interesting, and you've got the backstory behind it. But you know, it's maybe right now and like it's alpha stages for you. Like you're just now at the point where you're like, well, now I have to figure out how to talk about it now. Like it's still maturing, even though it's been there for a while. What's that been like, man? Like getting the overseer from your sketchbook to on a building on your website, like.
Yeah, it's been nuts. But I mean, shout out to all the collaborators and folks that have kind of helped me through this journey. Because it would have been a lot harder, if I didn't have that support, early on and stuff. And especially with the support and stuff that I have now. But yeah, so the overseer, it was a lot of things, man. So it's one of my passion projects that blew up into something that involved more opportunity, working with other people and stuff. But anyway, I'm going all over the place with that. But so it was a project that I actually started in junior high, and part of this story appropriated a lot of different cultures that I didn't really quite understand as a junior high student in the late 90s. I was inspired by comic books and cartoons around that time, as I mentioned earlier. But damn, man, like this thing was a martial arts story at one point. It was a story that talked specifically about religion. It was a story that included all of like my friends and best friends at the time. I like made all these characters up that mirrored other people and like their environments and their cultures and stuff. And it took a bunch of years later, for me to realize like how much I didn't talk about blackness, how much I didn't, portray, like the black image, into my works and stuff. And it was more so recently, that I really started, trying to figure things out with that. But junior high and high school, so late 90s and in high school, 2000, 2004, it became something that was sort of a love letter, to all of like, my experiences with like my friends and like just the morals and principles that I really wanted to live by, in terms of being a good citizen and good to like, other people and being tolerant of other, cultures and ideologies and all of this stuff. And yeah, and then as I started finding sort of my creative calling, in Omaha, and started meeting all these artists and talking with Gerard and this, that, and the third, I had an opportunity to work with an actual model and a photographer for this project early on, and that sort of kind of it served as a blueprint for the type of works that I create today. Works that involve the talents and skill sets of other people and treating it as a collaboration. Like some people call them muses or muses. Is that plural?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's some weird sort of like implications with that I wanted to distance myself away from. And collaborators kind of just, became this thing that I really enjoyed because it is truly a collaboration, So in this case, so it was 2014, I believe, was when I first started working with the model Hope Dettinger, and Jamie Olds was a photographer. and I met them through this circuit of arts, like raw artists. Kind of, you know, I don't really want to talk about that organization,
Mm.
but they hosted a bunch of art parties and stuff every other month or like semi-annually or something. But it was a cool opportunity to connect with other creatives. I had this idea of working with a model and using their reference for this character, and then that's when Priya the Overseer came about.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Priya was the name of a friend that I made at this leadership camp that I went to in high school. And this leadership camp was a very special place, you know, for me. At this leadership camp, they taught a bunch of area high school kids about, you know, bias, bigotry, and racism, and ways that we can fight against all of that stuff. And You know, she was someone, and just, you know, like with my other friends too, you know, she was someone that I wanted to depict in this project. Um, but it was hella problematic. So Priya, I believe she was Indian, and for whatever reason, I felt like I needed to appropriate, you know, henna, you know, designs and like, you know, a whole like, you know, like Hindu style like clothing and stuff, and and then the model that I worked with didn't identify with any of that stuff. You know, she was
Uh-huh.
white. The photographer was white. I am not of that culture. Um, and what was crazy about this was that in Omaha, I don't feel like any of that stuff was challenged. Like no one said anything to me about this, you know, and maybe if they did, they didn't say it directly to me.
Huh.
So I'm painting this
That's
character,
interesting.
and I'm designing all of this. Like I'm designing the story, and you know it develops into, you know, okay, well, this character is a demigoddess, and you know, and you know, she has this like, you know, like crazy connection with humanity and the universe and all this other stuff or whatever. But like the aesthetics needed to be updated. And so it was a project that I had been kind of sitting on, you know, for a bit, and then, you know, I moved to the Twin Cities with my ex, and you know, then that's when, you know, that understanding of like appropriation, you know, kind of, you know, came out of all of this, and I was just like, okay, I really need to go back to the drawing board on this because what I'm doing is kind of messed up. And Even now, you know, I wonder, you know, just how many conversations I should have had, you know, with other people about like, you know, the appearance of something. Um, but The next step with that was to, okay, start being intentional, you know, with your work. And as you guys, you know, heard, you know, earlier, you know, like with the type of work that I want to create, you know, talking about, you know, cultures and environments and sharing stories, that sort of thing, it's very important that I understand my privilege, you know, in all of this. And You know, not to over identify, I feel like, and that's, I don't feel like that's
Hmm.
really a thing, but like, you know, like, you know, holding on to, you know, the fact that, hey, I'm this, you know, black artist that's like, you know, dealing with this, like this crazy plight and this and that. So I'm making this and that. Um, and instead, you know, I was just like, hey, like, I'm not Indian, you know, I'm not part of that culture. There's no reason for me to be a part of that. And so I reached out to a long
That's
friend of
interesting.
mine, Katie Thomas. Um, Sorry, you were saying something? My bad.
Oh, nah, I wasn't saying, I was talking to myself. I'm sorry. I was just
Oh,
saying that's
my
like,
bad.
that's just hella interesting, man. Like, this is a lot of nuance that I didn't know about.
Man, it's nuts, man. But I had to go through it, you know. And a lot of it was pretty uncomfortable, but I feel like an important part of all of this is that like I had to be okay with being uncomfortable because that, you know, that allowed, you know, some growth, you know, to come of that. Um, but yeah, so when I started this spray paint thing, I remember my friend Katie Thomas, who is the overseer. She is the one that's being depicted. So Katie and I, we went to high school. junior high and high school together. And after I started picking this stuff up, she had worked at Mangelson's, the art store that I got all my spray paints and stuff from. And she has just been paying attention ever since then, and she's just like, I love your work, you do amazing stuff. And then I started looking into her stuff, and she's doing a lot of modeling and like runway stuff, and she has her own like agency with like other models that she works with, and it just didn't hit me until years later, which was just a couple years ago, that I'm like, I need to work with her, because this is an opportunity to not only work with someone who's like just prolific and all the stuff that she does, with her modeling and her experience and stuff. But we go way back, we went to the same high school, Gerard and I, we went to the same high school, and so there's this energy that was there that I just, for whatever reason, I didn't tap into up until, just a few years back. Katie and I, we worked on a couple little small projects. I had put her on a small mural project up at the old Intermediate Arts building here in Minneapolis. And, I went to Hong Kong for my second time, and I tried putting a piece up there that involved her likeness. And it seemed like a natural thing, that she wanted to be a part of, anytime that I reached out to her for some stuff. And shoot, after some events that happened last year, I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna reach out to Katie. I want to really like fully get her involved, into this project. And she said yes, and the rest is history. So there you go.
That's so dope, man. And she's like, this project has gotten to the point, like, these aren't like personal projects, right? Like, these projects have ended up on the side of buildings, right? Like, you guys are pretty well involved when it comes to, and you've also done like smaller personal projects with her in regards to Overseer, right?
Yeah. So what I'm doing with this project, so like I said, she is the face of the original character that I created. It's a project I've been working on since junior high and high school. And the sort of direction that I take now with my projects is that I have a heavy involvement with working with real people, with a purpose of, just highlighting their story in some sort of way. So, I just told you about, Katie's, story. And, the idea is that like, as this evolves and stuff, there's like feedback that I get, from the people that I'm depicting, and like, really just trying to keep them more involved in like the work that I try to produce. Mm-hmm. And just continue on with this like, relationship and conversation, about like public art and what it means to them as well. But with this particular character, it's set in stone, like this is the physique, this is how she's going to look, throughout this until, we have more conversation and stuff. But yeah, this year has been interesting because of the murders. I feel like people are, giving, Black artists, more of a platform, and my immediate goal this year was to put more positive Black images out there, more positive images that, like had a bit more in-depth, discussion about things. And in this case, it's kind of dealing with, divinity and humanity and like, all the associated things, with that. And that's still developing too, but yeah, so.
Cool.
I have to say, when I saw the Overseer stuff on your website, it got me super excited at this idea that there was this bigger story behind this thing that I was looking at, and that I would, in the future see more parts of this story on other buildings.
Universe willing.
Right.
I've told Reggie this is like he's got his own like literal Marvel universe thing that he's going. I personally feel like this is pretty revolutionary stuff when it comes to storytelling through art. Like I can't think of anything that's been done quite like this before.
Well, shoot. It's like it's keeping me busy. I feel like with these characters, that I've been developing, for X amount of years, or a couple decades, or whatever. It's helped with the creative process a ton. Um, and when I started up this overseer project, it was an opportunity for me to connect with other creatives. But as far as like the story element is concerned, um, hell yeah, I want to create my own, Marvel universe and put all these elements together and stuff. And like, it's it's been a dream of mine, to keep doing this. So and I'm going to keep doing it even, with the murals not even being, in the picture, and I have a skill set now to where like, hey, I can put this stuff on a website, shout out to Ray, for helping me build this thing. Um, again, like I talk about collaborations and stuff, and like that's a thing that I consider a collaboration. Using that as a sort of vessel to, put forth all of like my creative energy and whatnot. So with this overseer story, um, I have some ideas. I have some connections and stuff, but it's still gonna take some time to develop. I have to find the right people for references. Not that I absolutely need, other people for references, but there are things that I want because I feel like that kind of fleshes, out this whole project, because again, it's involving real people and real circumstances and whatnot. So. Um,
When you
it
say
was
references, are you talking about visual references or contextual references?
a little bit of both. So definitely the visual, because with this project, I rely on like photo references and things. I
Right.
can create things from scratch, but things get a bit cartoony.
Mm.
I don't have those references. But that's an energy that I'm reserving for another project that I'm going to try to connect in a different way. So that's the whole Project Pups thing that's on my arm and stuff.
Oh, that's right. You do have a tattoo of that.
Yeah. So
Can we see it? Can
um
you talk about it real quick? Go into that.
yeah, yeah, totally. So this was so I'm left-handed. So this was a little show you my little baby arms here. Um so these two characters are kind of like my flagship creative characters. So you have the overseer right here, different style, different design and stuff. And yeah, so that was done by an Omaha tattooist. And Yeah, so same demigoddess character, and then you have this character Pups, who is this wolf kid.
Huh.
Again, I really don't mean to be showing off my baby arms here.
You're
But
good, man. Show it off.
No, the art looks good, man.
Thank you. So yeah, it was an artist Dave Koenig, in Omaha. I keep messing up his last name, but I reached out to him and gave him my design, and he did it in his own style, and yeah, came out wonderful. Um, and then I had a second session that I was supposed to pay him for, and I didn't have the money, so it's just lying with it right now. Um, but uh, but yeah, the idea is to link all of these characters to a set of star clusters called the Pleiades. Um,
Seven
and
Sisters.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the Seven Sisters, yeah, so you probably watch Cosmos. Um, but yeah, so the idea is that with the Seven Sisters or the Pleiades, there were so many different forms of folklore that was associated with the same star cluster that existed in the same space that all these different civilizations had a viewpoint to on planet Earth. And they all had their own separate stories, that were different from each other. And I thought that shit was really cool. And so that was an idea that sort of fueled the connection with all these other characters. So in the Project Pup story, Pups is this like 14-year-old wolf kid who can fly and teleport and has super strength and all of the things that I'm envisioning in the story. It's very like comic book and like anime manga esque. Um, and then when you get into the lore, behind it, you find out that he gets these abilities from a series of subconscious destinations called the astral planes. And one of the characters who created the astral planes is this bear named Ursa, and Ursa is one of the seven sisters.
Right. Yeah, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor for
Yeah,
all the astrology.
yeah. Well, Ursa's actually she's gonna be both of them, so she's gonna be
Okay.
a big old deal. But I think I might play on the Ursa Major, Ursa Minor thing. That project's been temporarily shelved, so I can work on this current project. And just a little tidbit for anybody that's reading that might care. Maybe I don't know. But the Overseer. Well, I'll ask you guys. Like, is it okay that I like spoil it a little bit?
Yeah, man, go for it, man. It's your world. Exclusives. Like,
So the Overseer is one of the seven sisters as well.
okay.
So the story with the Overseer is that she's this demigoddess that was created by a set of gods and goddesses. Right now, I just call them the creators. She had a purpose of really just ruling over humanity. Humans, they suck. They don't know how to lead each other. We're like lowly creatures and this and that. And so the creators created a new goddess or demigoddess to kind of take the helm. But the problem with this is that, well, the demigoddess really, really loved humans. She was really into them. She was writing all kinds of poems and love letters and like having all these cool connections, and stuff with them. And the creators didn't like that, because they created her from, a piece of the Pleiades, because they felt like with the knowledge and wisdom that came from those star clusters, she would have this aptitude to be like, oh, okay, well, these people need to be ruled this way. But she didn't fall in love with them. And so they had this big old disagreement. And I won't go into the other specific stuff, but the fight got so bad, between the Overseer or the demigoddess and these other creators, that she kind of just shut down. She went into exile. She hid, but the place that she took refuge in was actually her own set of astral plane. That the creators didn't even have access to. And that came from the fact that she's, created from a piece of the Pleiades. And so there's this whole big old thing that happened with that. So in that sort of way, I'm going to have some connection with her and Ursa, with them being completely different, universes. And of course, that's going to take some time to develop. So, yeah.
Dude, that sounds awesome. I love this creative detail.
So I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. So thank you for that. Thank you for allowing this platform. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, that sounds crazy, bro. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there that I hadn't even there's a lot of nuance that a lot of it is totally new to me. So thank you for going into that.
That's because we keep playing Tekken and talking about The Last of Us and stuff.
Man, we need to get back to that.
I don't mind at all, but
it's been a minute. Tekken has kind of been, it's not been dry, but it's been like, it's in this weird limbo state where it doesn't know exactly. Nobody knows exactly where it's going yet. I mean, wherever it's going, it'll be up, but the community has been. Man, what's going on with Tekken right now, man? Like, they got some characters that are broken, kinda. It needs to be rebalanced. The community's pissed off. They won't stop screaming about it, but they won't stop playing it either. And so it's just this obnoxious symphony of like big man children that won't stop complaining about this game they won't stop playing.
Oh man. Well, you know, we've been through this series, you know, for a while since you and I, you know, we've been playing this thing competitively since 5, and you see all the sort of ebbs and flows and everything that's kind of going on with it. But I miss it. You know, I'm taking a break, you know, from it since all the George Floyd stuff happened. But you know, season 4, you know, comes back, and I'm gonna love to jump back on the Steam and play with all my Minnesota bros. But you know, as much shit as I want to talk about it, as much stuff that I want to like gripe about, you know, with the game. I'm still gonna play it. I'm still gonna love it, and I feel like it's because of the community. You know, I moved here and I fell right into, you know, some of the FGC folks. And
what is FGC?
That's what I enjoy.
What's FGC mean?
Oh, fighting game community. Yeah, fighting game community folks. Yeah, so fun fact, who may or may not know, I'm a little bit of a gamer. And you know, that's you know, I'm gonna say that's helping my creative process. That's why I play video games.
Yeah, of course.
So, we'll go with that. It's educational.
I had a question for y'all. So how has I want to get back to Last of Us, but how has coronavirus been affecting you guys in regards to your video gaming? Because I know that we all have shifted. I mean, you can look at. I mean, you hear Reggie's story. Scott's got all that stuff you see in the background is different from the last time Scott and I talked. Like, there's always something that's changing with it. But we all kind of like have had our gaming habits affected a little bit by Corona. So what's going on with y'all? How are you guys gaming these days?
Well, I am buying digital downloads. That's the thing. I don't step into GameStop and Walmart and all these places because, you know, being around people, that's nasty. That's icky. Yeah, you know, like I don't want to catch Corona, you know, picking up Final Fantasy or anything. You know, like,
right.
You know, but I mean, it's been relaxing, you know, for me. Oh, hold on. I don't say relaxing because, like, I bought The Last of Us and forgot that it's a survival horror game. I was like, oh, hey, what's happening in Ellie's world? Like, that was like the thing I was like thinking about, and I was just like, wait, hold on. There's cordyceps.
That game is tragic. That is not a game I would ever classify as like relaxing by any. It is the most stressful or like it's. Name a game more stressful than Last of Us. That's not like Resident Evil or like some horror game. Like, I don't think you can.
I mean, not in recent memory. I'm sure I could think of some stuff. Final Fantasy was fucking frustrating at times. But you know, we don't want to get all crazy into that. But like yeah. But what? I think just like technical, you know, wise, but. I don't know.
So I got it thanks to coronavirus, COVID-19. I got into Witcher 3, which I've never been an RPG player. No, not at all. I want quick in, quick out. You know, okay. Long drawn out stories and character arcs, and like I'm all for a good character arc in a game, but like. You know, FPS campaign kind of thing, not an RPG. But whatever, The Witcher sucked me in, man. And you know, I blame Netflix because I watched the series first. Here's what happened.
That'll do it.
Because I started playing the game, and I was like, no, this is just like Skyrim. Fuck this. And then I watched the series on Netflix, and I was like, dude, this is badass. And I know some of the plot because of the game. I got excited. I went back to the game, and I've been on that shit since.
What is it about the show that got you into the game?
Um, it scratched the Game of Thrones itch, I think.
Mm.
You know, there was that. It's that like fantasy action, but with like good character development, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the game's got all that same stuff, man. It's like there's like there's combat and action in the game, but it's almost secondary to all the like the adventuring and the stories and like the layers of stories too. You know, it's like which at first I felt like was cheap. You know, and it was like a cop out on developers like, oh, I need to find Siri, and then you're like, oh, but in order to do that, you need to talk to this Baron, and the Baron makes you do 3 different things before he'll tell you the information you need to get to the next step on your other mission. And I was like, this is bullshit. But then you get into it, right? And you're like, oh yeah, what's he gonna do next? You know?
And you were telling me before, like the characters, like those motherfuckers take you for a ride. Like they're not necessarily straight up with you. Like they might, like just like the show, they might be getting you into some straight up bullshit. Like, and you won't even realize it until you done kill somebody that, like, just like probably sparked a war between 2 like clans you didn't even know existed or some shit.
Yeah, and that's the thing with that game too, is that like there are definitely a few key points in that game where if you make one decision, it goes off in one direction, and you make another decision, it goes off in a different direction. And so it's like you kind of got to be on point with throwing down some manual saves so that you can go back if you don't want to do something, you know. And like I don't know, that's all been a little bit new to me because it's not really been my cup of tea for a long time. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect that I got into because of COVID is, well, you can see it behind me.
Oh, I didn't even see the chair. Oh,
I've been hiding it. Yeah, that's actually a seat out of a Nissan 370Z that I bought on Craigslist for $40.
Oh my goodness!
And then I built this little wood thing underneath that connects it to this wheel stand that I got there.
I need to set my shit up. Like I got a new TV. That's it. That's all I got. I don't have any like Oculus Rifts or like none of that stuff. So
buy it all on Craigslist, man. All Craigslist or Facebook. But what ended up happening is I'm a member of this Tar Heel Sports Car Club, so they run these autocross events and track day events and stuff that I do in real life, and COVID hits and that stuff becomes a lot harder to do. So one of the guys that is into racing cars in real life decided to put together a league in iRacing. And
what is iRacing?
So iRacing is like pure racing simulation. So there's like, it's not like Forza Horizon where there's like a bunch of like I don't know, it's just pure racing simulation. It's not so much like a game,
It's like you're actually driving a car in a game.
Yeah, every session you get into, even practice sessions, every other car on track is another human being. There's actually, it's not entirely true. They do have an AI set of races now, but when it started, it was like, if you see another car on track, it's a human being.
Are they all using a rig like what you have?
Well, look, like that steering wheel comes with a clamp that you can put on a desk, and with the pedals underneath the desk. And that's how I started, was clamping stuff to the desk and just using the monitor, and that's that. So you get everybody, you get everything from like, people using just their monitor and clamping the wheel to the desk. So like full motion simulators where the whole rig moves around as you steer to simulate the G-forces.
That's crazy.
And the crazy stuff is that iRacing is so creates such a realistic simulation of actual racing and the competition that exists in racing that professional race car drivers in NASCAR and Formula One are members of the service.
So you're competing with some of the best drivers in the world in this game.
Well, so there's an I rating, and my I rating doesn't put me in the splits that those drivers
are.
Have.
For sure. That's pretty dope though. Like, I mean, because before you were actually racing, like you were actually like you have a car that you take on the track and you would actually actually shred it up. So that's like, would you consider like a viable exchange? Like, is it something like, well, it's not like being in my car, but it'll do. But or do you actually?
It's a solid virtual alternative, and because it's so good, one of the reasons you see professional drivers using the service is because that it allows them to train on new tracks that they haven't been driving recently.
Oh, so it's cheating.
No, it's not cheating. It's preparation, man. Preparation.
All right.
Like, I was able to run laps of Virginia International Raceway. I had run hundreds of laps because I knew it was a local track before I ever went. And when I finally got to go to a track day event and I took my car there, I already knew every turn, every elevation change, and the ideal driving line to get through the turns as quickly as possible before ever actually driving the track in person. And so it allowed me to get to a higher level quicker in real life. Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This game is you've told me about this game before. And this ain't like no like it's different from Forza and like all those other racing games.
In how a subscription service for starters.
How much does it cost to play? Wait, the game is a subscription service.
The game is a subscription, yeah.
Okay.
And it's been like that for the past decade.
Damn.
And so you get like a base number of tracks and cars when you subscribe, and then if you move up and you want to like do new races and things, like you can buy different cars and buy different tracks, and you have them forever, even if you quit the service and come back, which I've done because I've been on it since like 2011.
Mm-hmm.
But you take some time off to do other things in life, obviously.
That's cool. That's good. Also, like you only pay for what you're actually getting out of it, so it's not like you drop a certain amount of money and then the game continues to evolve and you come back to it, you can't play it because everybody's all good and I don't know. That seems like a good model for what it does. That's cool.
It's pretty cool. And they have an I rating, which is like how well you do in races. Your I rating improves.
Mm-hmm.
But separate from that, there's a safety rating. So even if you do well in races, if you have a lot of wheels off the track or contact with other cars, it decreases your safety rating, and that impacts your ability to move up in license levels.
Okay.
So it behooves you to drive clean, and it prevents people from being dickheads and driving backwards on the track just to wreck people, sort of stuff.
Don't be an asshole unless you want to be publicly shamed.
Well, they'll just ban you. They'll straight ban you. They have little tolerance for that shit.
That's good. That's like GTA. Like if you want to play like that, like go fucking play Grand Theft Auto. Like
that's exactly right.
Man, I've been playing a lot of I've been playing 2 games. Well, Tekken notwithstanding. We can assume I'm always playing Tekken.
Of course.
But I've been playing Doom Eternal, and I've been playing Last of Us 2. Doom Eternal, I know, Scott, you and we talked a lot about that. I probably talked to you about that as well, Reggie, and I probably complained about it.
Yeah, the menus and shit you were complaining about.
Yeah, man.
That I do.
Playing.
I fell in love. I don't know how it happened, man. Like, you know what? Like, so, like, the game, like, so I fixed the menu. So the UI has all these issues that I had problems with that I've effectively fixed to the extent that I could the first few times that I played it. Went away from it and was able to come back to it, and like those things, like I'm really sensitive to visual noise. Like if there's too much going on the screen, I'll see it, and if I don't like it, I'm gonna get pissed about it. I'm gonna scream about it like a big baby. And Doom Eternal gets in its own way. Like I still feel like it does it. Like it gives away strategies to hold boss fights before you even can control your character on a boss fight. Like it'd be like, all right, cool. Like bet. So this is this big ass spider, right? This is what you do. You shoot off his 2 things, and then those things are gonna break, and then his homies are gonna come out. You gotta shoot him in the ass, and then you shoot him in the head. You got it? Okay, now go fight him. Like, and all of these things, like all of the weak points are still highlighted by, like, you can see the weak points on the dude's body, like when you shoot, like it tells you all this stuff, but it just feeds it to you like I'm, spending tokens on the game. Like
I wonder
just,
what the focus groups were like, with that, for that to happen in there.
man, this is what I think. So because the gameplay loop, like the core gameplay loop, is so good that you almost like when the game is not in its own way, you forget about it. Like, I'm pretty far in the game now. I'm probably 20 or so hours into it, 30 hours into it. And it gets to this point where the gameplay is rhythmic. It's like, you're dashing all over the place. You're triple jumping. Your guns have limited ammo, so you're switching between 6 different guns that all have an entire weapon mod that you can switch out on the fly that changes the way the gun operates. And some enemies are more susceptible to some certain types of fire than others. And so you have 2 different types of grenades. You have a flamethrower that you can use, and all these things do different things. So like, you set people on fire to drop, or if you need armor, because all the enemies are on fire, will drop armor. And, enemies that are staggered, you can do a glory kill on, that'll give you health. Or you can use your chainsaw, and that'll give you ammo. But you need fucking gas to use a chainsaw. So there's all these systems that you have to be aware of. But the game feels like it has to tell you all of that shit, like, right in the first hour. Like, it just has to, it dumps it on you. It's like, and I can't deal with whoever their interface artist is that just fucking jizzed all over everything. I'm still pissed off about it. Like, there are just some things that were just so there are steps back. Like, that was what pissed me off initially. It's like, I was a huge fan of Doom 2016. So some aspects of Doom Eternal are just steps back. But the gameplay isn't. Scott, you and I talked about this. Oh, Reggie, you and I might have talked about this as well. Like, video games as art, and why, like, video games aren't... People don't press video games for having a bad user experience if it tells a good story, if it plays like art. Doom Eternal's gameplay loop is art. Like, through and through, like, they fucking get it. Like, these guys, like, could have revolutionized first-person shooters. Like, they revolutionized first-person shooters with Doom 2016. And they did it so well that they were their own competition. And then they dunked on Doom 2016. And so, like, they're doing all of these complex things. And so, like, I get the hype, like, the way it storytells with the environment. Like, it does a lot of cool things. But the things that I loved about Doom 2016, they just kind of take steps back on. Like, the story's a little more convoluted. And so now there's more things that you have to read through text in order to see. But, the font's goddamn near unreadable, so you can't really read it. And so it's like, there are like all these menu customizations that they added, but they made the menu a little less sensible. So you have to actually stare at it to understand it. Like, it's, I don't know, it took some steps back, but the gameplay loop, what's up?
I'm sorry, I was going to ask, so on a scale of 1 to 5, how many Mountain Dews would you give it?
Oh, I would give it 10. Like, that game makes Mountain Dew out of blood. Like, that game is infinite Mountain Dews, man. Like, it's crazy, dude. Like, I've streamed playing that game, right? You can see, like, y'all heard me talk shit about that game, but
scale 1 to 5, he said 10.
Dude, it is pure raw adrenaline. You don't understand. Like, that game brings out the fucking, like, it's like injecting it into your veins. Like, especially when you win, like, when you're zipping through all these enemies and you throw some kind of grenade and you stun lock the biggest dude that's all the way in the back, and you double jump and dash twice through the air, and then you throw some grenade at some other dudes and kill 5 dudes on the way, and then you glory kill the dude while you're still in the fucking air, and then you fucking pull out your rocket launcher, blow the rest of the dudes up, and you're just like, man, fuck yeah, bro! Like, this shit is crazy sick. Like, it takes you there. Like, the gameplay is so, but when you play though, you're also like, you're fucking sweating, you can't talk straight, you can't concentrate. Like, like, I can play Tekken on stream and be like playing high level matches, but that game's so second nature to me that I can usually play without like losing myself, like, or like having to completely focus and completely shutting up and getting in this flow state. But like I can talk my shit in Tekken, but Doom, my words come out as gibberish. I start sweating. I start telling people like, "Yeah, hold up." I start getting it. It's special. It's a cool game. Like it gets in its own way, but it's highly worth the money. And if you catch it on sale, it's worth every penny. Like it's worth the $60 if you want the single player. Like that game, it's sorely lacking in multiplayer. I don't know what the fuck they did with the multiplayer. And
I was curious because I read a lot about the multiplayer and how they've got like you can be the demons or you can be the Doom Slayer guy. And
people fucks with it. I mean, like it. I mean, I don't know the extent to which they do, but I know that I've seen tournaments on it, which was baffling to me. Like, I mean, but
you haven't messed with it.
I haven't messed with it. Like, I mean, it's cool. I still have to make my way through the single player. Like, and honestly, like, I'm still a little pissed off that they don't have classic multiplayer. Like, Doom's 2016's classic multiplayer, I feel was woefully slept on. I feel like it did so many things right, and people.
Those Unreal Tournament servers are still up, man.
Man, like, but Unreal Tournament won't make a real comeback. Like, they're too busy spending all their money on Fortnite. There's so many more vulgar things I wanted to say. Like they're too busy showboating over this goddamn case and doing all this like.
Oh yeah.
They're sitting on their good IPs. I think like Unreal Tournament needs an official comeback. I can't entertain it where it is now because Epic. I said Epic. We're gonna go on this in one of these podcasts one day. But Epic, I flew too close to the sun. I loved them until I didn't. It was good till it wasn't. But I still fucks with what they do. But yeah, it's Doom Eternal. Like, I mean, they have Quake, and so with Quake Champions, that's kind of doing what Doom 2016 set out to do with multiplayer. And it does it a little better. It's a little faster, which is what people like didn't like about 2016 was that it wasn't fast enough. Even though that game's mad fast. I don't know. Like, I think like my biggest problem with Doom Eternal going into it seemed like they lost their focus. Like, but as you grow with the game, you understand what like it. No, it's hella focused, but it's just a little convoluted at worst.
Yeah.
But then there's Last of Us. Oh, I'm sorry.
I like having the two different games. Like I'll bust into Witcher when I'm like I just need to chill out and like ride my horse around some cool scenery, and then do some missions when I feel like, or quests or whatever the fuck you want to call them. But then when I want to focus and I want to I gotta turn the ceiling fan on high and like I'm ready to sweat. That's how do some racing,
That's good, man. 2 games, man. Like 2 good games to sink your teeth into is all you really need these days. At least at a time. I mean, you could do more, but these games are so damn dense these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's getting late. We've been on the call for a little while, but the next time we do one of these, we're gonna have to talk about the new consoles, man. We have not touched on that yet.
Yes, indeed. And also another thing I would like to do, and we'll have to, Reggie, I would like to borrow your time again sometime in the very near future.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to
talking as much as I'm doing. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, nah, man. Hell no, not at all.
Okay.
I want to showcase your work, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Like I've actually got a few pieces around here that I would like you to give some backstory on because they tell a hell of a story. But I would also like you to we could spend all day going through your website and talking through those pieces. I mean, like Scott's clearly seen your work, and we've got a whole lot of conversation out of that. So we should totally figure out how to, we could just dedicate like an hour or so to your portfolio, man, and you can just like kind of walk us through the work that you've done, and we can, gloat over it.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Is that something you're trying to do now?
Nah. Okay. Yeah. Nah, next time. But you know what? Yeah, like let's go ahead and wrap this up, y'all. I appreciate y'all sticking around. Yo, we have been the Design Critics. Hey, Reggie, where can we find you, man?
We're on our website, RAL86.com. That's spelled RAL86.com. It's going to link you to my Instagram at RAL86, my Facebook at RAL86.com, and a Twitter that I don't use that I will be changing. I'll be using it a little more often here. So those are my dedicated places there.
Hell yeah. What about you, Scott? Where you at, man?
Yeah, you can check out my YouTube at Toy Box Garage.
Mm-hmm.
You can see I do some general car video stuff, but also my on-track experiences, and then also the sim racing stuff too.
Right on.
That's what's up. All right, and then of course, you can find me here on my Twitch a lot of times. If I'm on social media, you can find me at the Real Ray Mills _ on Instagram, or you can find me on the Real Ray Mills on Twitch. I also have a design Twitch and Instagram. You can find at Ray Mills Designs. I've been posting a lot more of my little personal projects that I've been up to, including the ARM graphics pack, which is now free. Which, by the way, if y'all are looking for a layout for your Twitch streams and you don't want to pay, some dude a bunch of money to get it done, I have a pretty sleek one that I made for the sole purpose of being modular and sleek. Super easy to use, customizable, and it'll look good depending on whatever the hell you want to do with it. You can throw your own images on it. It'll always look good. You can get that on my website at therealraymills.com. You can also find more episodes of this podcast. You can also find a link to T7 Chicken Plus, which, if you're a Tekken 7 player, is a frame data app, or what I like to call an encyclopedia app for Tekken 7. Get all your needs. If you're trying to get good at the game, that's the place you want to go. We're going to be updating that app soon. Otherwise, yeah, just keep it locked here in the future. I play a lot of games here, and we do our thing, but that's us, y'all, and that's the show. And so I'm gonna go ahead and shut it down. I love y'all. Take care of yourselves. Wash your hands. Wash your ass.
Wear your mask.
And wear your mask.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, indeed. Wash your hands. Wash your ass. Wear a mask. Tell your loved ones you love them. Fuck the fucking world. And check out my new album, Sis Kill. Y'all remember that shit? The dude that tried to jump through the ice? It's like, motherfucker, fuck the fucking world.
I like that.
All right. Anyway, that's it, y'all. We done. We out of here. Hey, thank you for sticking around, y'all. Take care.
All right. Peace, y'all.
Later.